Hello, everybody. Welcome to AC3 Fireside Chat. Are you being warmed by the pumpkin? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I don't know. I was just pretending it was on fire.
There's always
Can
fire.
we add fire? No, I'm
Yes.
kidding.
Well, that's because, excuse me, we are laying down some fire.
We're dropping some
We're
bombs.
dropping fire on the Fireside Chat. And today we're going to talk about this fascinating movement on the religious landscape of the West, Alex. And it's the conversion of these really famous former skeptics.
Atheists.
Atheist skeptics.
For those of us that don't know what skeptics might mean.
Yes, right. So these very famous non-believers. Now, are you familiar with the New Atheist movement?
You maybe are talking about the deconstruction movement?
Well, deconstruction probably
And
happened in
de-churching.
part as a result of the New Atheist. So the New Atheist movement kind of was really a reaction to 9/11.
Okay.
So Islam shows up on our shores as this radical religious experience, and this is religion as toxic as it gets, right?
Yeah.
In the name of God, we're
kill
going to
people.
kill people, right? And so,
Which Christianity has done.
which Christianity has done. But in that particular case, it was radical Islam, right? So as a result of that, there was all this pushback against former religion, and it was atheism, but it was called the New Atheism because it was it was evangelical in the sense that it was about making people deconvert,
Atheists, yeah.
right? Making people atheists.
It became a religion of its own.
Right,
in a
because the
sense.
old atheism didn't tend to care. Old atheists like Bertrand Russell and Friedrich Nietzsche, and those atheists were like, yeah, you can be an idiot if you want, but
Right.
I don't really care. I'm just buying the idea that skepticism is the way of life, and Christianity is most certainly false. But they didn't care to make you a non-Christian. They just, yeah. So the New Atheists did. They wanted.
They became evangelical atheists.
Exactly. So as a result, then we experienced a great de-churching. And so talk about that a little bit, because that then kind of grew out of that. All these people leaving the
Yeah.
church. And you probably know some people who was like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I used to buy into the Jesus thing, and
I actually have two specific friends. Both of them, their parents were missionaries. So they grew up in another country. They were doing the ministry thing. They were ministry kids, and they come out of that and they they go to a church, a former church I worked at, and then they decide, you know what, I'm going to become an intern at this church. I think I'm going to go into ministry as well. They start interning. And then this deconstruction thing starts to come about. We start to see a lot of famous Christians who are starting to say, maybe Jesus isn't all it's cracked up to be, or Christianity is not all it's cracked up to be. And ultimately, some deconstruction is important and good because you want to tear apart your Bible and say, what is God actually saying here?
right.
But they got to the point where God didn't exist, or God wanted to hurt them, or God was harmful, or Christianity was harmful for them. And I have a specific individual who would message me and say, hey, why are you hurting people?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, whoa.
Just because you were in ministry.
Yeah, just because I was, in their words, I was brainwashing the youth.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not causing anyone to believe anything.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get them to critically think for themselves.
Yeah.
And so that would become the deconstruction movement is I have a church hurt. And that's really what it stemmed from was, they became these people because they're like, well, then why would Christians treat me this way?
Right.
And it's like, well, because we're all broken.
Yes.
And they became this, well, if the church is hurting people, then I don't want to be a part of it.
Yep. I think that's so true, and a good summary of, I think, the main impetus behind the deconstruction movement. So you have the New Atheists saying, religion is bunk, it's delusional. One of the books of the New Atheists was called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. So the idea is if I believe in God, I believe in a delusion, that makes me a delusional person.
So now I have a mental illness.
Yeah, and I have a mental illness, that kind of thing. But I guess what's ironic about what you described is that most of the de-churching happened not as a result of really considering the arguments and really going in depth, but a lot of it was emotional. A lot of it stemmed from church hurt. People not feeling accepted, not feeling loved. A lot of it was tied to the rise of the homosexual revolution. And so if you...
Or the sexual revolution.
Or the sexual revolution in the 70s, and then the homosexual revolution around the early aughts.
What do you mean I can't live with my boyfriend?
Exactly, the whole thing. So that Christianity had a sexual ethic was itself deemed to be abusive.
Yep.
That it had a sexual framework was inherently wrong. And it was just inherently deemed to be something that was restrictive and repressive and the whole thing. Okay, so I like what we're doing here, Alex, because we're kind of framing the last 25 years, because you have these movements, right? So you got the new atheism, which is peddling skepticism, and you have the deconstruction movement, which is disaffected Christians mostly, or let's just say, not to diminish everybody's intellectual life, but there's a lot of emotional hurt attached to the deconstruction movement. Now, here's a third thing. The third thing is an apologetics cottage industry that we've never seen before. In other words, an apologetics.
Explain that.
Okay, so apologetics is from the Greek word apologia, which simply means to give a reason or to have a reason. Okay. And what I'm describing is a movement of people who realize that the reasons for accepting Christianity as probably true, were growing. The reasons to believe that. We were finding more intellectual resources to believe that Christianity was true. The number of Christian philosophers on mainstream universities was growing. The number of people who were starting YouTube channels, and all they talked about was reasons to believe that Christianity was true, was growing. And this was from people who were non-experts to people who had a lot of letters after their name.
Yeah.
And so, and that coincided with a bunch of really cool discoveries. Like, for example, in the sciences, the fine-tuning of the universe was coming into such focus. I was like, wow,
yeah,
this place is really finely tuned. The moral argument was like, hey, we can't divorce ourselves from morality. And so the idea that
who determines it?
Yeah, right. So the idea of a moral lawgiver, that argument started to make sense. And then there was also an argument for God from evolution. So evolution was causing some Christians to leave the faith, like, hey, if evolution is true, the Bible can't be true. But then a guy named Alvin Plantinga started an argument that basically said the evolutionary argument against naturalism. And I'm going to summarize it, okay? So it's a little heady.
It's not the full, yeah.
Reach with me, okay? So the argument goes something like this. If evolution is true, our reasoning faculties are nothing more than just atoms in motion inside of our brains. And as Darwin once said, would you trust the intuitions of a monkey? Would you trust the conclusions of a monkey's brain? And the answer is, no, you wouldn't.
So if we came from that,
why would you trust your brain?
Yeah.
But we do trust our brain. That we have an instinct to believe that our reasoning faculties are sound. If we do, there's no basis for that in evolution. So if evolution is true, our reasoning faculties cannot be true or cannot be trustworthy unless there's a God who has grounded our reasoning faculties in something sound. Okay.
And so this starts to blow up.
That's the argument, right? So basically, if evolution is true, naturalism can't be true.
Right.
So what a wild argument.
Yeah.
The argument is basically this thing that you thought was a club to beat Christianity with and say Christianity is false because evolution. Alvin Plantinga is saying, well, if evolution is true, naturalism can't be true. Evolution became a reason to beat naturalism over the head. In other words, to say that it's probably false if evolution is true.
And then you started getting the nuances of it, right?
Yes,
and
right.
It was like, all of a sudden what we said is if evolution is true, then obviously God doesn't exist. And it's like, well,
where's that written?
Yeah, like if microevolution is true, that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It just means that he's a creator who literally knows how to manipulate, everything.
Yes.
And it became macroevolution, that becomes an argument. But if we say people can adapt to their environments, I am a living, breathing proof of this. I came from Arizona.
Yeah. Have you adapted?
I am now in Washington.
Right.
And I don't dress like my parents do when they come to visit.
Yeah.
Because I have adapted to the weather and I've adapted to this.
Right.
That's a microevolution type thing. But we all of a sudden said, if any evolution is true, God must not be right.
Right.
And it was just such an absolute.
Yeah, and why must that be the conclusion we reach? Yeah, and so that in and of itself, like, so the idea that a species can adapt seems to actually be a design feature. And how amazing is that? Okay, so we won't go down that rabbit hole of evolution.
My question to you is, Rick, can there be an intellectual Christian?
Right, so that's the deal, right? So suddenly you have this incredible work that's being done, ironically, Alex, while the de-churching's happening, and you have this intellectual movement inside of Christendom. A lot of it's conservative, a lot of it's Bible-believing. Like, so in other words, these aren't, what's happening in liberal denominations is they're actually buying into all the skeptical arguments against Christianity. They're just trying to retain a belief in God, but accept the naturalistic view of the human mind, of human sexuality, evolution, naturalism, the whole thing. It's like
they're trying to
have
their cake and eat it.
Yeah, like a little bit. Let's buy into everything that the secular establishment says is true, which is basically a naturalistic worldview, but we'll sew a little Jesus onto it. Meanwhile, these robust Christian thinkers, most of them conservative, most of them Bible-believing, are finding all these reasons to believe that Christianity is true. And so here's a fourth thing that's going on. In the culture, as the culture is divorcing itself from a Christian worldview, from the Christian moorings, we're going into sort of crazy town a little bit. We're starting to question science. We're starting to question gender. We're starting to question all sorts of things. And one of the things we talked about with the sexual revolution, right? That it's not, the results are in, and the results are not necessarily good, right?
No.
So now,
turns out when you have sex with multiple people, it's not good.
right? Exactly. And when you treat sex as if it doesn't have an inherent design, it actually
hurts you.
It hurts you. It bites you. So now, with all those moving parts, you have this incredible counterintuitive phenomena, which is these intellectuals becoming Christians.
Really?
And here's three names that are listed, and these are talked about extensively in a recent edition of Christianity Today. We'll link the article, won't we? We'll link the article, Lee.
Yeah, we'll link it.
So we'll link the article, the CT article, this Christianity Today article. That's the title of it is "Some of Christianity's Biggest Skeptics Are Becoming Vocal Converts." And I say it's counterintuitive, Alex, because it's in light of this great de-churching movement,
right,
and on the heels of the great rise of the new atheists.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. It's like God is doing something radical through this intellectual reasoning and apologetics. And one of the arguments in one of my Bible school courses was basically to argue why apologetics doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And I had to argue like why it doesn't always work, but here's the reality: it does work for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And especially for these intellectual people who are high thinkers, you know, they're thinking about every little nuance about everything.
Yep.
They need intellectual reasons.
Right.
But some of us think this is a new thing, Rick. Some of us think this has just come up in recent years. But I have news.
Yeah.
Paul did this.
Absolutely.
Like in your New Testament, the Apostle Paul would go into Roman cities and argue with philosophers who would have been seen as these intellects.
Yeah, the modern intellect.
The modern intellect, and he was giving them reasons to believe.
Yes.
And so this is something that is still occurring today.
Yeah. And Jesus did the same thing. He appealed to reasons and evidence. Like there's one famous time when John the Baptist is in prison, and it's like a huge crisis moment in his ministry, right?
Right.
He was sent to prepare the way for the coming Messiah. He was convinced Jesus is the one. He gets thrown in the slammer for his unbelievably bold takes. He had some hot takes.
He had some hot
political takes.
You know what? That's a new sermon series. We got to
that's it.
We got to do it. Yeah.
So he's thrown in the slammer for his hot takes, and as a result, he's having a crisis of faith. He sends disciples to Jesus, say, "Are you the one?" And you think that if the Christian movement was entirely to be a non-intellectual movement, in other words, a movement divorced from evidence and reason, it's just emotional, it's just spiritual, that Jesus would send back and say, "Man, you were supposed to pave the way for the Messiah, and just believe, man. Like just have faith." Instead, he says, You go back, you tell John what you've seen and heard.
Yeah.
So in other words, send him evidence. And then he says what they've seen and heard. The good news is preached to the poor, the blind see, the lame walk. I am showing the evidence of being the Jewish Messiah. Send him evidence. So the Christian faith is not opposed to evidence.
Which people think it is.
Yeah, sometimes they think it is. That faith itself is anti-evidence. But what faith is really, it's trust in the direction of evidence. Faith is believing what you become convinced is true despite some difficulty.
So wait, Rick, this might be mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
So you're telling me an atheist has to have faith?
Absolutely. Yes.
Because they have to have faith
Yes.
that the world was created by a system of accidents.
But yeah, and out of nothing. In other words, Alex, there's gaps in our knowledge, and we fill those in with faith. And everybody has those gaps. Everybody has those gaps.
So for someone who's an atheist says, I don't have any religion, or I don't have any following of belief. They do.
Absolutely. I'll name the very first and most important faith leap that the atheist is making. The atheist trusts, in an absolute kind of way, their own intellectual ability to reason. Now, as I said, Darwin was one of the ones who tipped us off to this. He says the horrid doubt, he called it the horrid doubt, for me, is whether you can trust the conclusions
Of your mind.
of your mind. But that is an absolutely unassailable faith position that an atheist has. Now, they think they have good reasons to trust their mind, but they don't have absolute knowledge, and their belief in the trustworthiness of their own reasoning powers, their own sensory experience, is a faith position. And even the position that all knowledge must be gained by science is a faith position, because you can't test that scientifically.
No.
So
one of the questions...
Yes, everybody has faith.
So everyone has faith. So another question I have is, we're seeing these intellectuals come to know Jesus and become vocal about it.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few of them over the last couple of weeks. There was the famous actor, what's his name? Russell Brand, right?
Oh yeah, Russell Brand, comedian. He did some acting in
Yeah.
Hollywood, did a lot of comedian, and then started social and political commentary for the last 5 years. Famously married to Katy Perry.
Yes.
For a cup of coffee.
Yeah, for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Also, pastor's daughter.
Also a pastor's daughter. Fascinating.
But you talked about him, and then we got some faces on this thing that you were mentioning.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, as we look at these individuals, what do you see as a consistent reasoning that they have started to shift away? Is there a specific intellectual reason?
Well, some of them, what unites them? I think what unites a lot of them is the shock value of a culture moving away from its Christian moorings. Okay? So as they see that happening, they're not believers themselves.
Yeah.
But they're smart enough to know that they live in a Western environment that was heavily flavored by Christendom.
Yes.
Then they ask themselves, is it good or bad that we're moving away from that Christian mooring?
Is this a good idea?
Is this a good idea? Now, a lot of people, in the early 2000s, when the new atheists are writing, it's yes, it's an unquestionable good that we become less religious. But now we're 25 years down the road from that, Alex. And is it good that we're becoming less religious? Bill Maher cites these statistics of how much less religious we are than we were in 2000. And he, the great skeptic, says, he attributes this to himself, of course. And the joke, he cites the statistics, and then he looks into the camera with his typical snark and says, "You're welcome." Right? Meaning, I am an atheist, and I take credit for the fact that I've risen the level of skepticism in the culture. This is the same guy who rails against the expansion of our dumbness, our ignorance, our lack of scientific training, our intellectual shallowness and stupidity. He's constantly railing against that. And so it's but he doesn't get the connection.
Yeah.
That in a society that's rising in its anti-Christian bias, and its lack of spirituality is also a society that's rising in its level of
Complacency.
stupidity, lack of initiative, all the things that Bill Maher rails against all the time. So other people, I guess, less willing than Bill Maher to sort of live with that disconnect in the brain. And here's 3 people mentioned in the article. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, we can talk about her in just a second, Tom Holland, and Ann Wilson. And you mentioned Russell Brand as another example, and there's probably 3 or 4 more. Paul Kingsnorth is another one of them. Someone that was considered one of the most important writers in modern England. Well, so if you were in England, you'd know who this guy was. He became a Christian just in the last year and a half, right? Why? And I think that what ties these people together, Alex, is their common sense that Western society, breaking from its Christian moorings, has been an unequivocal disaster. Okay? So
they're seeing results in the culture that they are not liking.
They're not liking. They're going, this isn't good. This isn't good. We're becoming...
And they're tracking that, and they're saying, like any good scientist does, they're saying, where's the root?
Yes.
What was the cause of the fall of this thing, or what was the reasoning for the bad results?
Exactly.
Right? Because if I'm a scientist, I'm trying to make a robot, or I'm trying to code and engineer a robot to pick a lock, let's just say, and it's just hitting the side of the wall, right? I'm like, I'm going to go back into my code, track down where it went wrong.
Exactly.
And that's similar to what they're doing.
I think that's a great way of putting it. Yep. So now the article asks the follow-up question. I'll throw it to you. The question is, okay, if that's your impetus to become a Christian, is your faith real, or is it just an intellectual? Christianity is good for us. It's not necessarily true, but it's good for us, so I'll pretend.
Sure.
It'll be like a little bit of charades that we do to pretend that Christianity is true, even if we can't really believe it's true because of its benefits.
Sure. So I think as you asked that question, I just need some clarification. So I guess the question is, are they converting, or are they practicing Christian morals?
A great question. And I think in the case of Russell Brand, baptized, and he talks like a Christian now. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, just a little bit of background on her. I think she's Nigerian, a former fundamentalist Muslim. She was female circumcised, so like all in, and then radically broke from fundamentalist Islam, became a member of parliament in, I believe it was Holland, in the Netherlands, and a famous skeptic. Like she shared the stage with Richard Dawkins.
Okay.
So she built skepticism.
And did she get baptized?
She got baptized.
Okay, so when we're looking at these individuals who have been baptized, they're making a public confession of their faith.
Yeah.
So I would not say that they're faking it.
No, but now Tom Holland,
okay,
a historian, and a guy who, how does his conversion story go? Well, he looks at everything that he loves about Western society, human rights, freedom, representative government.
Sure.
Okay, and he says, where did that come from? He had been led to believe that it came from Renaissance.
Sure.
From Enlightenment rationalism. In other words, people breaking away from Christianity. And he realized, no, that's not where it came from at all. It came from the church. So then, and so this is. I just want to quote him here because
no, do it.
You're asking whether is he just a moral Christian, or is he a real Christian? Here's what he says. When it comes to his morals and ethics, Holland said he learned to accept that he was, quote, thoroughly and profoundly Christian, unquote.
Okay.
A realization he boldly underscored in a later interview with British historian Dan Snow, quote, I have come to the conclusion that, essentially, I am Christian.
Essentially.
Unquote. Yeah. Now, I don't think he's been baptized.
So, in that case, what we're asking...
He's saying he thinks...
He's thinking like a Christian. And for us to go and say, hey, you're not a Christian, or you are a Christian, that's between him and the Lord.
Yeah, there's some of that where are
like
we to
some
judge,
of that's
are we to
on
judge
our own.
that? Yeah.
And like what he is saying is that God has gotten a hold of his heart in a way. Because there's no way that someone who is adamantly against Christianity can start to say Christianity seems like a good idea without some sort of Holy Spirit movement in their heart.
I agree with that. And then what remains is whether that person is truly born again, truly
Yeah.
born of the Spirit. And I think that's
that's a whole process.
It is. I do think, and again, this is a tangent, Alex, but I think that's one of the reasons why baptism is so brilliant.
Yeah.
Because baptism
It forces you.
Yeah. Baptism is a physical rite, and it's external. And yes, we believe, and I just posted on this, by the way, on our website, on our Ask Anything blog, does baptism save you? My answer is an unequivocal no. Baptism doesn't save you. However, baptism and faith are intimately tied in the Scriptures.
Yep.
And it's a brilliant rite that Jesus embeds into the very DNA of the church because faith is so nebulous. So a Holland can say, you know what, I thought a lot about it, and I think like a Christian. I think that's true of me. But is he a Christian?
And that takes a pastor to follow up with it.
Right, and I think then baptism clarifies.
Yeah.
Because it'll be like, Tom, maybe you are a Christian. I mean, do you have faith in the Lord Jesus? And I think he was a good guy, and I think he laid down great thought and principles that I love.
But do you believe he was God?
Right, exactly. And not just some of the intellectual things, but have you entrusted your life, your sin, your whole situation into his hands? And he'd say, well, I live like it. Okay, great. Come and be baptized.
Right. Well,
and then it's like, well, hey, ho, 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 ho. I didn't go that far.
Right. And it's the public declaration.
Yes,
right?
that's super clarifying.
Public declaration. And that's why a lot of people will say, well, what about the thief on the cross? You know, he didn't get baptized. And it's like, but he made a pretty public declaration as he's sitting on that cross in front of people.
Yes.
He wasn't doing it by himself in a corner.
Right.
He was in front of people.
Right.
And that's the thing, is it's got to be a public declaration with other people to take you and hold you accountable to that thing.
And I agree. And that's the beauty of baptism. It's the public declaration. It's that outer sign of the inner reality.
Yeah.
And the reason why it should always be tied, even though if you and I both believe that baptism does not save you because of the inherent value of the water. The water is not magic. But nevertheless, it's a beautiful complement to the act of faith because I can convince myself on the inside that I believe 100 different things.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to say, yeah, but now come
Publicly.
Into the public, get in this tub of water, and declare in front of the world your colors. Make them clear. I believe and trust in the Lord Jesus Christ.
And I think that's a common misconception, right? It's this idea like, well, I don't need to be saved. I don't gotta get baptized to be saved. So why would I, go up there and embarrass myself or whatever they might be thinking, especially with teenagers, right?
Right.
And the idea is that, no, this is you claiming your belief in Jesus publicly in a way that the world can hold you accountable to.
Yes.
So when we talk about, Ayan Hirsi Ali, it's like, she got baptized.
She got baptized.
And it wasn't just like something that only some people knew about.
Right.
Like, it's national news.
No, it was. And she wrote an article, Why I Am Now a Christian.
And now, so that person, 100%,
Yeah.
like there's no question, you are now under a microscope
Yes.
by all the skeptics of the world,
Right.
wondering how you're going to mess up.
Right. Now, you're right. And that, I think we can draw a distinction then between Ayan, who has put herself on the line through baptism, Russell Brand, who's put himself on the line through baptism, and other people like, for example, I'll throw out two names, and again, we're suspending final judgment on this, belongs to the Lord. But we can note the difference. Tom Holland, who I believe has not been baptized, but who says, I am essentially Christian. What he means is, I think like a Christian, even if I have no personal faith in the Lord Jesus.
Yeah.
And even if, okay. So, I think we have reason to question whether
I would call him a seeker.
Yeah, like, is that a real conversion experience? Jordan Peterson. I mean,
That's a big name.
That's a big name. But like Jordan Peterson, throw him in the list, man. Is that Ann Wilson? What's his name?
Yeah, Ann Wilson.
Ann Wilson, Ayan Hirsi Ali, and Tom Holland. Well, throw
Jordan Peterson.
He is part of this phenomena. And you try to pin him down on, or do you believe in God question? He says, well, I live like I do. So, well, do you believe that a personal
Relationship.
being exists outside of the universe, omniscient, all-powerful, this being that Christianity purports? Well, I live as if I believe that's true. And he's very coy about it. And then the question is, would he come out of the woodwork and be baptized? Well, I don't think he has yet. But his daughter has, which is a fascinating phenomenon, right?
And he's supportive of it.
Oh, he's very supportive of it. There's another person, let's throw her into the list, Louise Perry.
Oh, Sexual Revolution book.
The book questioning the value of the sexual revolution. She is, I think, let's call her a Christophile, which is she loves Jesus in that I admire you,
Yeah.
and she admires.
She's never claimed him to be God.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But I'm not discouraged by that at all. I don't know if
No,
you are.
no,
I
not at
know
all.
This is incredible. The whole movement excites me.
Well, and here's the thing. What we've done is we've said, well, they're not Christians, so that's concerning. And it's like,
No,
yeah,
I don't.
it's concerning in the sense that we want them to go to heaven.
Yeah.
But it's awesome that
It
they
is.
are battling and saying, wow, look at these moral things that Jesus did. Almost 100% of the time in conversions,
Yes.
especially with people who were not born into a Christian family.
Yeah.
They'll look at the person of Jesus first.
Yeah.
And say, wow, his teachings and his lifestyle work. Mm-hmm. Maybe I should do that thing.
Right. Let's look at this again.
Maybe I should follow this guy because
Yeah.
he seems to know a thing or two.
Yeah.
And as you step in, that was my story, man. Like as you step into that realm and you start doing what he's called you to do, and you're like, oh wow, community matters. Maybe I should get connected to a church. And oh wow, prayer matters. Maybe I should try that. Oh wow. And all of a sudden you find yourself 5 feet down the road saying, why have I not just accepted this?
Yeah.
Because he's clearly God.
Yes.
Like
exactly.
And I know a guy at our church that could sit here and explain that far better than I could, because you know who I'm talking about. But just the idea that his own journey was similar to that, where it's like, he just said, well, this just makes sense. And he's talking, he's in this, you can add his name to this list.
Absolutely.
Because he was just that same way. He's like, the culture is weird. I don't like the culture, but the Christian culture seems like a good idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to go into that, figure out what that's like. Wow. Yeah, I'm going to live this life because that's pretty cool. Oh, wait, Jesus is God.
Yeah, right.
It's just a moment.
And now it's personal for me. Alex, I'm just blown away by how wonderful God is. Like when I think about that we would give in to despair on our own, right? We'd say to ourselves, wow, 30 million people have left the church in America between the years of 2000 and 2024. And we go, wow, this is the death of the church.
Sure.
I mean, no one said that. But
some have.
Right, some have, absolutely. And then you got the great de-churching, and if you listen to ex-evangelicals, and they're so bitter and they're so disaffected.
It's so clear that they have church hurt.
They have so much church hurt. Isn't it fascinating that right on the heels of that movement, you have this other movement?
Right.
And here are people who, at the exact same time that some people are saying this is the wrong time of day to put your lot in with those evangelicals who are Jesus crazy and their religious fundamentalism and
they follow
their
like
anti-science
morals.
and their whole and the wrong time of day to follow those Christians who are too political and all the reasons, right? And right on the heels of that movement is this movement, whatever this is. This will have this needs to have a name. I don't know what it is.
The intellectual movement?
Yeah, because like what you said is, okay, these are 5 big names we're talking about, Russell Brand, these guys. But at the local level,
it's happening.
Right, multiply this by tens of thousands, maybe millions of people who, in the great backlash against the de-churching movement, are finding hope and faith in Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, our friend I've talked to, and I'm not mentioning names, but I've talked to him multiple times, and just his idea of like, well, the culture was falling apart. I was lonely. I was sad. I didn't have community. Like no one talked to each other. It was just, and then he found the church, and he's like, people are nice.
Right.
Wait a minute. There's like good things here.
Which is wild because the great de-churching people, the ex-evangelicals, will say the opposite. The church is not nice.
Yeah.
The church is vicious and mean and cruel and they
How
love
dare
Trump
they?
and how can they love and they're bad people. Like how could it be so different, right? How could people get an assessment of the same institution so different?
I got the answer for you. It's gonna be crazy.
Tell me.
You ready for this?
Tell me, Alex.
The church is not a place for perfect people. It's a hospital for the broken.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, your pastor, your church leader, your elder, they all have some sort of part of their life that God's working on.
Oh, wow. You know,
And it turns out that when they mess up and you just hold it in and you just leave the church and don't tell them, they may not know that they hurt you. Or they may not know that you were offended by what they said.
or you might not have given them an opportunity to address your problem.
Yeah.
You might have had an intellectual problem that you, like one of these, what was the famous, it was a worship leader that left the church.
Gungor? No.
Well, Gungor definitely did.
But there was another guy.
There might have been another guy that just specifically said, yeah, I left the church because, I couldn't believe that the universe was created 6,000 years ago. And it's like,
No,
dude,
all
did
Christians
you?
believe
No,
that.
right? Did you read a book?
Right.
Like what? And this is very dismissive for me to maybe say that, but come on, there were sharp Bible-believing Christians who have multiple different views of these contentious, these secondary issues, and you left the church over that? Come on, man! Like, so that tells me that, like you said, the probably the real reason was not intellectual, but mostly emotional because of church wounding and hurt.
And we talk about this a lot at our church, that Matthew 18 was written for a reason.
Yes.
That Jesus taught that to his disciples for a purpose. And it's because we know conflict will happen in relationship. And when I'm in a conflict with somebody, the world tells me to avoid it.
Yeah.
The world says, don't worry about it, just let them sleep it off, right? But Jesus says something completely countercultural to that.
Approach, don't avoid. Approach, don't avoid, yeah.
And it turns out when you actually talk to a Christian or someone in the church and you say, hey, you hurt me,
Yeah.
95% of the time, probably more than that, they're going to say sorry. Like, it's just wild to me. It's just wild to me.
Yeah. You know, what you said has really triggered something in me, Alex, because it's just fascinating to me that maybe the de-churching phenomena has exposed that far too large of a contingent of the modern church, at least in America, did not put their trust in Jesus, but they put their trust in church leaders. That they associated with a local church, and maybe it's all and not
100%.
And that blame is shared around. It's got to be shared with church leaders themselves that deified the church leader or uplifted the celebrity pastor.
Yeah, Bill Hybels.
The whole thing, right?
Yeah.
That's on the local church. But nevertheless, the individual believer, was your faith defined in whole or in part by your devotion to a leader? Did you associate that leader so strongly with Jesus that when the environment that they were a part of did something bad and hurt you, that it collapsed your faith?
Throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Throw the baby out with the bathwater. Meanwhile, this phenomena, what we haven't labeled it yet, Alex.
Yeah.
Someone's got to. But whatever this is, these people are not loving celebrity pastors.
No.
Right? They are not coming into the faith because someone gave a big woohoo worship service.
No.
They're coming into the faith due to a very heady intellectual process of
Wrestling.
going, where does the truth lie? Like they say, well, I'm a skeptic and I've been a cynic for a long time.
And they're not afraid to be wrong.
And they're saying, well, it doesn't lie here. And they're looking at the trajectory of the culture. They're saying, well, I don't have all the answers, but this isn't it.
Yeah.
Then that has caused them to be being intellectually honest to say, stop, I may need to consider this thing that I left behind, Christianity.
And I think, Rick, just on a fundamental cultural level, especially within young people, there's this idea that I'm wrong or I won't be respected. And that's just not true.
Yeah.
Like these intellectual people, what they're saying is, I might be wrong about this thing.
Yeah.
Let me do the research.
Yeah.
And the deconstructionist is saying, I'm hoping I'm wrong about this thing.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, some of them may honestly just be like, curious.
Absolutely.
But,
for sure.
But I think there's a distinct difference between saying, I might be wrong about this thing, and I hope I'm wrong about this thing. and it's like, it's like almost a interesting thing, because you think about like Lee Strobel, who he so desperately, he was probably part of this rising atheism. Like he was an evangelical atheist.
Yeah.
And he so desperately wanted his wife to get out of the church that he was like, I'm going to
prove this wrong.
I'm going to prove this wrong. And as a result, he became a Christian.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that you can somehow deconstruct Christianity and say, I'm not a believer anymore, when there's so much evidence out
right.
there.
Well, yeah, right. I totally agree with you, Alex. The irony of that those two things would go hand in hand. This rise in the apologetics movement, which is providing, and I'm you know this, I'm up to my eyeballs in this. I've got an unhealthy interest in apologetics.
He might be borderline obsessed.
Yeah. And
he goes to Celebrate Recovery for it.
There is more reasons to think that Christianity is true now than ever. Like literally.
We have so much evidence.
Yeah, if you went back into 1840 and you said, is there a good reason to be a Christian? Well, everybody's a Christian, but the irony is you had less reasons.
Yeah.
Less reasons to believe the faith was true, because that was before some of the interest in modern science that is showing the incredible design features of the universe. They didn't actually know that. They had an intuition about it, but they didn't have rock solid science that talked about the design issues. They also didn't have the evidence we have for the beginning of the universe. They just assumed that it probably had a beginning, but they didn't have a scientific reason. In other words, we have all these reasons, and at the same time that these reasons started to become more multiply, we had the great skeptic, the de-churching. So anyhow, I think as we kind of land the plane with this, Alex, there's a reason in this to be encouraged.
Sure, I think
To say that God's not dead, and that the church in the West may be due for a revival.
Yeah.
And it might happen on the heels of Gen Z.
Yeah, I hope so.
Who sees the bankruptcy in modern secularist movements and goes, well, that's not the answer. Let me look at Jesus again.
And if they don't, they will. But two things I want you to kind of end with, Rick, here for us. So tell the Christian what we should feel about this information, and then tell the non-Christian what the point is of this.
Well, I think for the Christian, I think the upshot is, do not give in to the lie that says a heart never changes.
Yeah.
Nor to the idea that somehow because Christianity's been pushed to the margins, that means that the church isn't growing and on schedule.
Yeah.
Right? That God has found a way to grow the church in the most intensely adversarial environments.
Turns out Scripture was right.
Yep, exactly.
The fire of hell will not.
Right. The gates of hell will not prevail against it. G.K. Chesterton once said, there's been several times in history that the church has gone to the dogs, and each time it was the dogs that died.
Right.
And so that's just something for the Christian to take away from this, I think. For the non-Christian, I think it's, if you rejected the faith because of an intellectual stumbling block, I would just challenge you to, just look at that again. Because maybe the person who tried to respond to your problem was maybe anti-intellectual, and I will confess this, that the evangelical tradition as a whole has not celebrated the life of the mind, and sometimes have been very anti-intellectual, sometimes as a knee-jerk way of defending the Bible. That every time a criticism of the Bible showed up, it was like, la, 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 we're not talking about that.
Cover our heads.
We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to think about that. Instead, I would say to you, skeptic, realize that sometimes your great skeptical arguments have been the occasion for the church to dig deep and find new, fresh reasons to believe.
Turns out Martin Luther had some issues with, the church.
Yeah, right?
He dug in.
He dug in, and we went, oh my goodness, the essential gospel is actually a beautiful thing, and some things that presented as Christianity maybe weren't Christianity. And so I would say that to you too, because tell me about this God you don't believe in, because there's a good chance I don't believe in that God either.
Right, exactly.
Right? There's a good chance I don't believe in that God either. And so let's stop straw manning Christianity and let's start steel manning it. Find out what is the best evidence for Christianity. If you can't believe after that,
okay,
God have mercy on you, and we will be friends. And
turns out we won't hate you.
Yeah, we don't hate you. But I will understand. I would never want anyone to be a Christian if they thought the weight of the evidence was against it. I just wouldn't. I wouldn't want you to, because I just believe the truth is that powerful. But yeah. So.
That's great, man.
But look at that again, and
just a shout out to you guys. We do this thing called investigations through our church. We do have that on YouTube, correct?
Yes, sir.
We do. So we answer some of these questions. We dig into some of this stuff.
Yep.
And here's the deal. This is what we'll tell you. Actually, I'm volunteering Rick because he's so obsessed with this stuff. So if you comment a question and attach your email, he will write you an email back.
It will happen.
With his take on that
Yeah.
intellectually, and maybe he'll even do a Zoom call with you or something.
Whatever you want.
Whatever you want. And
Yeah.
we just believe so heavily as a church that this is a place where you can ask hard questions. And so we encourage you to do that. And this is Fireside Chat.
Yeah. Maybe you'll be part of this great
Intellectual movement.
Yeah, whatever this is, this opposite of the de-churching.
It would be so cool if we could have a graphic where it just lit it on fire. 'Cause we
Maybe
just
our tech people could get on that.
drop some fire.
Lee, we're asking you to drop some fire onto this conversation.